Hey everyone, welcome back. This is the follow-up to my Balefire Hildryn video where I said I had another Hildryn setup lying around to showcase. In truth, this is just an updated version of an extremely old, unkillable melee Hildryn setup I showed over 2 years ago, way earlier in my content creator journey. Now, that setup actually still works, and if you want to see the underlying of where my gas setups and quadratic scaling damage all started, you can check that out at the top right. This kind of Hildryn setup gets between 100 and 110 kpm, depending on tile set and how aggressively you play. DE also changed how ground finishers work recently, which can lead to benefits or issues of the increased amount of random ground finishers on groups of enemies by accident. Okay. The premise of this loadout is quite simple. Be balanced for base steel path up to 2 hours, not centric to level 9k steel path circuit, but be easily adjustable for that if desired, and well, that's the content that suits. So what is the gimmick? Construct an unkillable Hildryn, just like the Balefire video, except focused around melee gameplay. Unkillable such that not even toxin damage can kill her because her passive blocks toxin damage and status from bypassing her shield so long as she has overshields remaining. As you can see, my shields have been purple the entire time of this video so far. In fact, at base steel path, not even a Blitz Xmas can bottom out her shields as it only does about 3000 damage, leaving her with 1300 remaining. Now, this Hildryn is an infinitely scaling DPS build because it relies on quadratic scaling damage and armor strip, which doubles as your survivability tool. Extremely simple to play and extreme effectiveness. I just go around casting my grouping ability or sourced elsewhere and melee enemies to death. There are 2 options you can do here actually, with all the new options in the past 2 years in Companion Rework. Most importantly, you can either use Diriga to self-prime enemies with Arc Coil and thus focus on grouping abilities and melee spam without shooting a primer, or you can use Nautilus to auto-group enemies with Cordon and Manifold cooldown resets and thus focus on utility abilities with melee spam and a primer. I chose to opt for the Diriga setup today for ease of use since we already have enough damage, but both work. For a full breakdown on the best Sentinels, or even just companions in general, I covered the entire companion rework and all new companion interactions in 2 separate videos you can check out at the top right. The first tool of today is the Rakta Dagger Dagger. This is a simple dagger melee, which is already a good melee class, with above average hitboxes, high stance multipliers, and a 0.9 follow through stat that makes it extremely good at killing groups of enemies so long as they are in range, which is why we use grouping. More importantly, this dagger in particular restores shield to your frame when dealing damage to enemies afflicted by radiation procs. It's a 5% shield leech. However, this passive only applies when you have shields remaining, and cannot bypass the natural shield recharge delay a fully broken shield has. So long as your shields are not empty, you will instantly negate all incoming damage by just continuing to deal damage yourself, maintaining Hildryn's passive to also block toxin one-shots. To deal with a fully broken shield, we'll discuss that later. The next tool is gas damage and Amalgam Argonak metal Auger. This is an augment for an otherwise useless primary weapon, and its only purpose is to stat stick this mod to allow daggers to armor strip, bring Amalgam Serration for faster sprint speed, and Dexterity Arcanes to increase combo duration utility. Now, Argonak Metal Auger is unique because unlike Shattering Impact, Metal Auger will armor strip from any damage source originating from daggers, be it applied status effects, lingering damage zones, etc., whereas Shattering Impact only strips armor on direct melee contact, for a melee that has impact damage present on it. Amalgam Argonak Metal Auger allows us to use gas clouds to strip damage from any enemy caught within the radius. More importantly, because each enemy can produce their own gas clouds to armor strip in an area, and we use a grouping tool to pull everything together, we end up with overlapping gas clouds in one spot. This is our source of quadratic scaling damage and armor strip today. 2 enemies produce 2 overlapping clouds to strip armor twice as fast from 2 enemies, thus the total armor stripped is 4 times higher. 3 enemies equals 3 clouds to hit 3 times more often and also hit all 3 enemies together at once for 9 times strip speed on the entire group. Of course, this also means gas damage is 4 times higher, or 9 times higher. In Steel Path, where it's common to group 10 or even 20 enemies together, this results in 100 times or 400 times faster armor strip and, of course, gas damage scaling. These clouds will even linger afterwards, meaning if you pull more enemies into these death auras, they will instantly get killed without you even needing to touch them. The third tool today is new with the companion update. You can either use a Nautilus with Cordon and Manifold Bond for you, so that you don't even have to bring a grouping helmet and can take something like Muzzle Flash for survivability, since we already mod super high range for grouping helmets at the cost of actually needing to shoot your pistol primer for condition overload, and also apply enough status effects to activate Manifold Bond for reducing Cordon cooldown so your Nautilus spams grouping more often. Or, you can take a Diriga with Arc Coil, which will automatically prime 7 enemies within 10 meters of you, every 2 seconds with any elements modded on your Sentinel Weapon, so long as Manifold Bond is equipped. Also, Manifold Bond will cut the cooldown of Arc Coil down to just half a second. The 10 meter limit isn't an issue due to taking a grouping helmet like Pull, Airburst, Larva, Ensnare, etc. And this allows you to just focus on melee spam and doesn't require you to shoot your pistol primer. More importantly, we have Guardian, a Sentinel Mod that fully resets our shield gate to full the instant they break, but it has a 30-second cooldown. This is an extremely important mod for Sentinels and should always be slotted as far to the left as possible on the top row due to mod hierarchy mechanics, with the exception of even more important precepts such as Cordon or Arc Coil at the top left. Manifold Bond is supposed to reduce Guardian cooldown, but appears to be somewhat bugged at the moment. I would still recommend bringing a bullet hose primer like Nukor, because shooting it and swinging your melee with Synset or Eject Magazine Exilus will allow the weapon to holster reload, which procs Reinforced Bond on every tick to grant shields back to your Sentinel at any given moment, even if their shields were fully depleted. This effectively makes your Sentinel unkillable. If you bring Volclock or Laser Prime Rifle, which the latter would need a crit chance ribbon, but you can pass 50% crit chance to activate Tenacious Bond for plus 1.2 times crit damage on your Rakta as well. Make sure to mod your Sentinel Weapon with Radiation and Viral. Radiation will activate Rakta's passive, so that it can always grant you Shield Leech on damage dealt, whereas Viral of course buffs Rakta's damage and statuses for condition overload. This allows you to focus on gas builds for Rakta Armor Strip if you're running Diriga, and not have to worry about diluting Rakta's Radiation Elemental weighting to upkeep its passive. For our Rakta build, it is rather simple, not that different from a standard Slash build for Steel Path, except instead of Slash, we went for gas. This means I run Condition Overload, Range, and a hybrid Blood Rush and Weeping Wounds with Primed Bane. Instead of Gladiator Might and an Attack Speed mod, I dropped both for Molten Impact and Primed Fever Strike. I want as high gas weight as possible to make sure it procs, and 60/60 heat and toxin mods do not matter, because they give little status compared to Weeping Wounds offering plus 440% at 12 times combo. It also grants us higher raw damage to kill unarmored enemies without needing to rely on gas dots. Again, we don't care about radiation weight because this is either covered by our Nukor primer or Diriga's Arc Coil and Sentinel Weapon modding. Use a Pointed Wind stance as it has better horizontal coverage and is perfect for cutting across crowds, especially if you find yourself not casting grouping. It also has better multipliers in general and is faster to complete its neutral combo. This Rakta build reaches 162% status at 12 times combo and has a 72% gas weight, meaning you should be inflicting at least 1 gas proc on average per hit on an enemy. Blood Rush only gets us 264.8% crit chance, and we have no attack speed. But this is both solved by Hildryn's build, which we will look at next. Take whatever focus school you want. Our Hildryn today does not need Archon shards at all, however I do lightly recommend considering casting speed shards if you're not on Matter to speed up grouping ability casts, but it really isn't that bad. This strength shard isn't needed really either. Our Hildryn uses a Combat Discipline in Arcane Avengers setup today to deal self-damage and guarantee 100% uptime on Avengers plus 45% flat crit. Combat Discipline is deranked to minimize self-damage, as this allows Rakta Dagger to pass 100% crit chance to fully benefit from crit damage and Tenacious Bond. Arcane Strike is our other arcane to compensate for no attack speed mods on our dagger setup. Prime Sure-Footed is self-explanatory, and Blazing Pillage functions as a backup crowd control tool, with better shield regen when you need to cast Pillage. This shouldn't be often since we have Rakta to regenerate shields, adaptation to make shields tankier, and crowd control from a grouping helmet of choice. Hildryn now has 3.5 seconds shield gate on full depletion, and fast deflection allows shields to begin recharging after only 2.2 seconds on a full break. This means so long as you keep moving, Hildryn will be able to cast Blazing Pillage before her health is hittable. For endurance scenarios where shields would not survive more than a single hit, replace adaptation with Rolling Guard. It is still recommended to keep fast deflection on if you want ultimate comfort, however it can be replaced by an augment if you're running Nautilus for grouping instead, and thus using a survivability helmet such as Muzzle Flash. Fast deflection is also the flex slot for more strength if you do not want to use Archon shards to hit at least 210 strength. This breakpoint allows Haven to grant 1050 increase to shield maximum, which allows Diriga to hit 1200 shields to activate reinforced bonds plus 60% fire rate passive. Do keep in mind this is not necessary, and you can just ignore the 210 breakpoint. 200 plus strength is still convenient for being able to full strip enemies into cast a pillage without needing to rely on grouping and melee spam Argonak Metal Auger. Redirection allows Hildryn to reach 4760 shields with Overshield, where the Blitz Eximus can only remove 3000 on direct hit with its Shockwave attack at base steel path. Of course, replace this mod and endurance for something else. And finally, range stat is obvious for grouping tool spam, or survivability tool spam such as Radio Blind, Breach Surge, or Muzzle Flash in the case of using Nautilus Cordon grouping. How to use the setup? If you are on Nautilus, you just cast Survivability Helmet as needed. When Cordon procs and groups enemies, prime them with your Nukor and melee them to death with Rakta. It should only take about 1 or 2 seconds. If an Acolyte spawns, prime them and then heavy attack with Rakta. This will work on Nautilus or Diriga setup since shooting your pistol is the fastest way to apply a ton of status. Daggers have force/heavy, so a single swing will be enough to bleed them out despite having modded Rakta entirely around gas. Building back to 12 times combo should be easy with access to grouping and arcane strike attack speed with primed reach. If you're using Diriga's Coil strat instead, you can just skip priming altogether outside of Acolytes, and just go around casting grouping and then swinging your melee. No matter what setup you use, your Rakta will instantly shred off all armor due to Amalgam Argonak Metal Auger, and spread quadratically scaling gas clouds to nuke everything caught within. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible, like I've done with the companion Rework. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.